Good Thursday, everyone. Welcome to the Volquest.com mailbag podcast presented by our friends at Blue Water Climate Control. Glad to have you along with us on this Thursday. Remember, now's the time to get that AC looked at. Now's the time to make sure your unit's in good shape for the summer. To do that, you need to call Blue Water Climate Control at 865-299-2290. And again, because of everything that the Volquest listeners have done in terms of referrals, you're going to get a discount on all service and repairs as a Volquest subscriber and listener to the podcast. So whatever you need, Blue Water Climate Control can take care of you. Whatever repair you need will be done the right way by the right people. Find out more at bluewaterclimatecontrol.com or give them a buzz at 865-299-2290. All right, guys, we'll jump right into the questions here. And we're out of the gates. Your thoughts on the neutral site game with West Virginia, neutral site games in general. Also, will the Jackson commitment have a domino effect? Austin, I'll start with you on the domino effect and your thoughts on neutral site games.
Domino effect with a bunch of commits? No, I don't think so. I mean, I still think that, a lot of people are taking a wait and see approach. I do think that he has an impact because he's going to work the phones. I do think that he's going to, be someone that like people look at and go, okay, that's a really good gift for Tennessee. Maybe I should actually, maybe they're a little more serious than we thought, and so I still think that the month of June proves to be more pivotal as far as getting commitments than late April or early May. But, hey, you never say never on adding a piece or two in the next little bit, so, as far as neutral site games, I'm not a fan of them. I like the good old freshman home. Wasn't a big fan when the Vols in Atlanta. Wasn't a big fan when the Vols played West Virginia and Charlotte. I would much rather go to Georgia Tech or to West Virginia and play that game, and then have them come back to Neyland.
Rob Lewis, neutral site games.
I could care less, especially if it's about West Virginia. I mean, what's the angle there? I mean, what's the history there? I mean, Jeremy Pruitt's first game, it does nothing for me. I mean, if you're going to play USC and in Jerry World, maybe that might move the needle a little bit. But Georgia Tech, NC State, West Virginia, yeah, blah.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's a money thing. I mean, you're gonna make some extra money on it, and you're gonna figure, that's the basis for it, is trying to figure out a way to create some more money. And obviously they've become popular, but a lot of people don't want to do home and homes. Coaches don't want to travel to other places and things like that. So a lot of people just don't want to do the home and home thing. But we'll see. I don't know that this will be a mainstay. I think this one's kind of been in the works a little bit prior to Danny White's arrival, and we'll see if he continues to do that moving forward in terms of.
As a proud Knoxville resident, and how much money does that cost the city, the county, when you don't play when you miss out on a home game every year? I mean, I would imagine it's millions.
Oh yeah, I mean it does. I mean there's no doubt it costs the area money, and that's why I don't think you can do them on a regular basis. But again, they're kind of the thing, kind of the not the cool thing, but they're something a lot of coaches are okay with because they don't want to travel home and homes. They they don't want to open or play on the road and other venues. A lot of coaches don't. So, and everybody's throwing these games together. The same thing, in basketball. And I know basketball doesn't bring in the revenue for a home game like others, but basketball in the preseason, nobody is playing at home. And so unfortunately that's trickled over into football, and it's it costs more financially to the city in football than it does anything in basketball, that's for sure. So we'll see what happens with more of those games, if they happen or if they don't happen moving forward. But it's just a mainstay in college athletics, unfortunately. So we'll see. All right, on to, speaking of scheduling, on to the next question for basketball. Any information out there as to what non-conference teams Rick Barnes is going to try to schedule this season? Going to go back and try to get that Gonzaga game, Rob? There'll be some neutral site games there, I'm sure. Any ideas on where Rick Barnes is going to overschedule this team for?
No, I mean, I already put it in the war room. I guess it's a big note, but put it in the war room last week. They're going to play ETSU I think probably the first game of the year. That's a solid that he's doing for Des Oliver. They're in a tournament in Connecticut that's going to be it's high level competition. I think UNC, Purdue, I think are two of the other teams. Another one is escaping me. I wouldn't rule out the Gonzaga thing. Rick, I mean, they were obviously going to do that this past year. He and Mark Few are good buddies, but that's not on the books yet. I actually had a talk with somebody this week about non-conference scheduling, and it's still way up in the air. Nothing's finalized. They're trying to get the Wisconsin game back on the books. But I would, based on what I've heard, I think it's safe to say there'll be a couple of marquee matchups in December that fans will enjoy.
Yep, always seems to be, because Rick Barnes loves to overschedule in the month of December. Loves to go really heavy with high quality competition there. All right, with Thursday being draft day, can we get a summary of Trevor Lawrence's recruitment and relationship with the Vols? Did Butch really say he wasn't a fit for this offense, or did Lawrence cool on Tennessee for some other reason? What is the full story here? I'll give my brief synopsis. Austin, you can jump in with anything else. Trevor Lawrence grew up liking Tennessee. Obviously has ties to Tennessee. He had Tennessee posters and things like that on his wall. He did come up here for one unofficial visit. I don't think he was ever told, quote, "You're not a fit for us." I don't think he felt like he was a fit for what Tennessee was doing offensively, and it never got any further down the road than that with Trevor Lawrence. That's my recollection of it. Maybe I'm missing something.
No, I think that's a pretty good synopsis. I mean, he never felt like he was going to be a good fit in what Butch Jones wanted to do. Again, yeah, Trevor can run.
Which was
that's not
in the SEC.
Yes, that's anytime Rob can get a jab in on Butch, he does. But I don't. I mean, like, again, Trevor can move around, so it's not like he was a statue. But like, I still don't think he felt like he, wanted to run exactly what Butch does. And they do a little bit of that at Clemson, but they don't do everything like Butch and them do offensively. And so, I do remember like people around the building like making comments like that though, Brent. I don't think he was told that, but I think that was more of a once they lost him, how that goes. I mean,
once he was never considering him any further, he wasn't good. He wasn't the right fit for them, right?
Again, I was told Josh Palmer was going to be better than T. Higgins, and I mean Josh Palmer's turned into a really solid receiver. Don't get me wrong, but if Josh Palmer can catch almost 1,000 yards worth of balls as a rookie in the NFL next year, then I'll be shocked. Which is what T. Higgins did.
Yep. Is Tennessee still recruiting committed kids like Groves, James, and the Wade twins? Any update on Miller beyond its Alabama, depending on camp, or us? And what's the latest on Isaiah Horton, Austin? Let's go with the committed kids. Groves, James, Wade twins. Anything going on there?
No, Groves is stock fell. They didn't want Groves to begin with. Like, that was not a loss to them. So that's not anything. The Wades, I think that they'll let that one lie for a little bit and then maybe reconvene around that one and see what the latest is coming up. Jordan James, no, I don't think they've had any contact with him since he committed to Georgia. As far as Cam Miller, what you just said, I mean, like, it's if he camps well at Alabama and they're willing to take him, then I'd say he probably goes to Alabama. If not, I think Tennessee is the favorite. And he's going to officially visit in June. And then with Isaiah Horton, not going to take any officials till the fall. We'll take some unofficials this summer, which includes a trip up to Tennessee. And don't see him doing anything until December at the earliest.
AP, I mean, with guys like Horton, isn't that what Tennessee? I mean, doesn't it fall in Tennessee's lap? I mean, if guys that want to wait and take visits in the fall, isn't that the perfect scenario? So they get some games on tape, and this is what we're about.
There are just not that many kids that want to do that, Rob. But you're right. Anybody that's willing to do that, 100%, it works out to Tennessee's advantage. I mean, Tennessee has to be proactive. They've got to have kids here that want to take visits. But like, if a kid really wants to wait till the fall, you bring them in for a game, you put up some points. I think that is much more advantageous for Tennessee to find success in recruiting going that route.
You show defensive guys how bad you need them.
Yeah. I mean, and look, I mean, here's the reality. They need to see it, and the spring game's not a great example of that. So if you can see it in the fall, absolutely. The problem is nobody. I think there's going to be this mad rush for a bunch of kids to commit in June just because they haven't been out there, and I think kids are going to fall in love with the first place they see because they haven't been anywhere. I mean, they haven't been out, and so I think that's why June is going to be so wild. Now the question is, do you have a bunch of decommits in the fall? I don't know. Maybe you do, but I think you're going to see a ton of movement in June with guys making decisions, or 1st of July after they go through their whole month of camps and whole month of officials and unofficial visits. Did Jimmy Holiday ever try to push to get reps as a quarterback once the new staff came in? I know when he came in last season, he wanted the opportunity and was moved quickly to receiver, but it seems he may fit this offense better. If this defense struggles, would you mark it up more to being a lack of talent or just not enough on-field experience? As for Jimmy Holiday, no interest, and I don't think he had any interest in playing quarterback once he moved to receiver a year ago.
Yeah, and it was his decision. They didn't move him. He requested the move. He practiced 2 days before COVID hit, and saw that I can't throw it like the rest of these guys can throw it. So he knew that his best option was to move to receiver. He's moved, never looked back. So, and as far as the defense, I think it's a combination of both. It's inexperience, and they just need more talent.
Rob, do you think it's more lack of talent or inexperience, or do you think it's both? You agree with AP? It's both.
I mean, I think it's both, but I lean towards lack of talent. When you're talking about, I mean, who's a dominant guy off the edge? I mean, we're talking about, Tyler Barron really needs to step up and be an impact player. He's a sophomore, and you've got nobody who's ever done anything at linebacker on the defense. And I mean, you've got some experience in the secondary, but who's a high level SEC player in the secondary? I don't think there's a single high level like first or second team all SEC player on the defense.
All right, on to the next one. With the NFL draft coming up, I'm curious to know, can you guys mostly tell day one when a kid sets foot on the practice field as a freshman, whether or not he's an NFL talent? Also, who are some of the guys that you've seen over the year that's improved their game enough at Tennessee as far as going from average player to NFL caliber? What potential do you see with this current roster? With some guys, sure. I mean, when Jamal Lewis got off the bus, he looked like an NFL running back right then. That one wasn't hard to figure out. Eric Berry, I mean, when Eric Berry ran sub 4.4 with a cast at a rivals camp, Rob, you were like, okay, that guy can play. So yeah, I mean, there are obvious
Gerard Mayo.
Yeah, there are obvious ones like that. In terms of guys who have improved their game enough, I mean, Austin, we talked about this guy while we were out driving around the state. I think Jabari Greer goes into that category. I mean, here's a guy who played multiple years in the NFL that when he was taken out of high school, he didn't have a ton of offers. He was a little bit undersized. And that's a guy who improved and developed to being a productive NFL player. Emmanuel Mosley is another example of that.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about Emmanuel, who's now after year 3, and Jabari Greer played a decade in the league. I mean, a lot of it's want to. I mean, like when I'm sure when you saw Jabari Greer get off the bus as a freshman, you were like, okay, but not a decade in the league type player. But yet there's a want to there and a drive, and then the kid's got enough athletic ability to make it happen.
It's both. I mean, sometimes, like you say, Hubbard, some guys have just been touched, by the hand of God, and like, I mean, Gerard Mayo looked like a Greek statue when he was a freshman. I mean, Eric Berry didn't look like a normal human being. But then you've got guys like you mentioned, Emmanuel Mosley, Cam Sutton, Justin Coleman, who, are guys that when they were freshmen, you had no idea that they were going to be signing, $50 million contracts. And
well, would you have thought that back in college, would you have thought that Ramon Foster was going to have a decade in the league and Aaron Sears was going to flame out?
That's a great story. I had a chance to talk to Ramon in the press box in the spring game this past weekend. And Hubbard, I don't know if you remember this. It was my first year doing Volquest back in 2002. You just started it not long before, and I was joking with Ramon that I actually wrote his commitment story, and it was like it was just one of those random checkup phone calls with a prospect. What's going on? Have you heard from Tennessee lately? As a matter of fact, I just committed to I just talked to Coach Fulmer earlier and committed tonight. Whereas if that was today, he'd be in the high school gym with 3 hats in front of him and live streaming something and back and then he was just, oh, by the way, I committed tonight, and then he goes on to play 10-12 years in the NFL.
Yeah, and he was not a guy when you saw him here that you wondered if he was going to be a starter at Tennessee. I mean, when he got here, he was a little bit of a quote project in the eyes. Everybody's like, Coach Fulmer's got that look in his eye. He thinks he can turn a guy into something, and he did. And the credit goes to Ramon for the work that he put in. And obviously, when he got to the NFL, a lot of people didn't believe in him when he got there. And he went on to have great success with the Pittsburgh Steelers. So, yeah, I mean, it's all over the map with guys. There are guys who come in and look like $1 million and they never pan into anything else. And sometimes it's the opposite.
And with Ramon in particular, think about all the offensive linemen that Philip was bringing in around that time. Cody Douglas, Sean Young, Michael Munoz, Jason Rushford. I mean, it's 4- and 5-star guys, and none of those guys made it. And Ramon is an off-the-radar kid from Ripley, Tennessee that, goes on and, wins 2 Super Bowls.
Yep, you're exactly right. All right, to the next one we go. I'm very concerned with the depth on defense next season. Can you shed light on the likelihood of signing a linebacker, defensive lineman in the transfer portal? Will we get anyone due to the investigation? How many by position do you think we may sign? Are we just simply screwed? Austin, feels like they're going to make some noise in the transfer portal on defense. But when it's all said and done.
Yeah, I mean, they are right now, Brent. They are trying to, get things closed out with a couple of guys. I mean, Jawan Mitchell is, I think very much a hard Tennessee lean at this point. But he's got to finish out, the semester at Texas and close it out strong. I mean, academically, and then Caleb Tremblay, who is at USC, defensive lineman. I think Tennessee's kicked the tires there, and wouldn't be shocked to see him end up here.
Yeah, and they obviously need help at both of those positions for sure, and that's been a priority for them. Has to be at linebacker, and it's become a priority on the defensive line as you went through the month of spring, or went through spring practice, and certainly you don't know what's going to happen with Darrell Middleton. Some of these other guys, it feels like there'll be some attrition on the defensive line as well. So they certainly want some addition to that group. What type of discussions at this point have White and Vitello had regarding the future of Tennessee baseball and the associated improvements of Lindsey Nelson Stadium? In talking to Danny White earlier this week, he's had conversations with Tony Vitello. He said that publicly in a couple of different forums. And, that's not something that they would typically do in the middle of the season. But I think White feels like he's got to be on the forefront of that to a degree. And he doesn't want it to be a distraction to Vitello. But they have had some discussions about what Tony Vitello is looking for and what he would want and need at Tennessee. The thing is, you don't break ground and do it June 1. You got to get your plans, you got to get approvals, you got to get the state bonds, you got to get all those things to take care of. So there's going to have to be some trust from Tony Vitello that this is going to really happen. He's been promised before that things were going to happen, and nothing happened there. So there's going to be a little bit of a trust factor that, and then obviously I think Danny White can ensure some of that trust by going ahead and financially raising Tony Vitello's salary, but also raising the salary of his staff, which I think is a big deal as well. What will happen, we'll see. I know Tennessee wants to keep Tony Vitello, and it's a priority for them to try to keep Tony Vitello, but we also know other schools are going to come after Tony Vitello. And I don't think that – I think there's some thought about playing some games at the new downtown park, but I don't think that anybody is suggesting to Vitello he's got to play all of them there. And I don't think Tony Vitello has any interest in that being his home park. I think he wants an on-campus facility, but certainly would be willing to play some marquee games in a downtown park. But I don't think he wants to play 40 home games in a downtown park. So we'll see what happens as they go through the rest of the season. Obviously, baseball is playing Thursday, Friday, Saturday this week against Kentucky in a key series for them at Lindsey Nelson Stadium. All right, the defense finished 7th in the SEC last year. You've taken the over, under, or push next year. I don't know what
Worse.
Daddy means by 7th.
I think he means better or worse. And I'll say worse.
Worse.
Hard to see him being better, but maybe they'll defend the middle of the field a little bit better than the last defense did, but we'll see. State of the Union for Josh Heupel's first 100 days. How is this athletic department working with the academic administration? I think they're fine. I don't think that they've had a whole lot of issues yet. Now, obviously, the university side, Austin, is very involved in the players who have gotten in trouble in the dorm room, and we'll see how all of that plays out when it's all said and done.
Yeah.
Who's not back?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think everybody's gonna be back. It's right now it's kind of that honeymoon period. Everybody's singing Kumbaya and they're all tweeting about, the cheer championships and, but they're putting on a very positive front, and as they should. I mean, I don't think anything's negative at all. I think everybody's, but again, all that's fine right now. Go out and lose a game you're not supposed to in the fall, and then nobody wants to hear that stuff. So,
this is a little tidbit. I mean, again, AP, this is just, it falls in line with dodgeball, and it's not going to win you a game, but just to highlight the different vibe. I know, like earlier this week, like Eckler and Golish, and I mean, like 10 different assistants and behind the scenes, recruiting staffers went over to Pratt and played pickup ball in the afternoon for like an hour. And this is the same university where I know for a fact in the past, a basketball assistant was asked to leave the weight room inside the football complex because they didn't want outsiders using it. And again, that doesn't mean crap for October Saturday, but just the whole different vibe of inclusion, I guess is the word. It's just such a different feel.
All right, a couple quick ones here as we get out the door. Rob, jumping headfirst into basketball hype train. Tell me why Rick won't have the same pitfalls with star freshmen as last year. Is it better that the national media hasn't caught on yet?
I don't know about the national media. I think COVID made Rick really gun shy about Keon and Jaden. I think when they had to shut it down for 2 weeks and they started the season and his freshmen hadn't practiced, hadn't been part of prepping with a game plan. I think that made him really put them on more of a shorter leash than he would have. I think that he learned from that experience. I think that he will be more prone to give Brandon Huntley Hatfield and Jonas Adu, more room to kind of make some mistakes than he did those other two in December. I thought he got a lot better with it in February, personally.
Austin, for you, this is looking like a borderline nightmare in football recruiting compared to our previous high hopes for the class of 22. What does a realistic scenario look like for clawing back to relevance? 3 years of 4-8 seasons. What are they looking like here?
The high hopes were before you changed coaches and did it in a late manner, and so on and so forth. So and again, I'm not saying that Tennessee didn't need to make a change. All I'm saying is the timing of the change was like, if Tennessee does that in December, think about how much further down the road they are recruiting wise with the 22 class, than they were getting the job in mid-February, and then really not having your full staff till late February. So, I think that, to kind of get this thing, what's realistic. I mean, Brent, you and I talked about this on our drive back. If you can land Isaiah Horton, you land Cam Miller, let's say you find a way to get Dallin Hayden, you get Addison Nichols, and then you got Taven Jackson. That's what 5, 6, 4 stars. You start building around that. And I'm sure you might trickle in one or two more. Or you take a kid that's 3-star and they end up getting bumped to a 4 before it's all said and done. And I think you could finish as high as 15 and as low as 25. I mean, that's kind of where my take is on where they'll end up finishing. When all is said and done.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, you got to hit on some really good evaluations. You've got to
Which
have some
which will put them
guys.
about ninth in the conference when you do
Yeah,
that. But it is what it is.
yeah, but I mean, you're not going to go out and line up right now and beat out playoff teams for a bunch of recruits around the southeast. So your evaluations of guys have to be really good, and your development of them have to be good early on to jumpstart this thing. And the biggest jumpstart, the easiest way to jumpstart it, is to win at the quarterback position. Find somebody who can win and be the trigger man for you at quarterback and be productive, because that changes the the timeline of your rebuild. If you've got a quarterback, if you spend the next 3 or 4 years trying to figure out who your quarterback's going to be, it's going to be really tough. You got to find the answer at quarterback. That's something that the last staff could not do.
I'm fascinated. Like, two of Tennessee's best looking freshmen that were early enrollees were 3-star guys, Miles Campbell and then Jalen Wright. What's that look like? Going forward. I mean, I'm fascinated to see a guy like Deshaun Rucker, coming here and they honestly need him to be able to contribute because they need depth in the secondary. But what can he give them? Who's another 3-star guy? Again, you want as good a class as you can get, because you're right. The top schools in college football are littered with 4 and 5-star players. But what I'm saying is that there are programs out there that have just coached them up. I mean, when Michigan State made the playoffs a few years ago, they weren't full of a bunch of 4-star and 5-star players. They were, a group that had good team chemistry, that had some good players, that had developed and had bought in. So, there's more than one way to skin a cat. It's just the easiest path is to get it flipped around with a good quarterback play and start landing those 4 and 5-star players.
All right, out the door here with a couple other quick things. Basketball, Rob, time frame on Tamba. Any current roster departures in your opinion? You think they all stay? And your prediction, other than Tamba, does Tennessee land anyone else, or they hold that spot open? Rapid fire.
Right now, as far as Tamba, I mean, I think June. I mean, I don't. I think the kid might just show up and go to summer school.
Okay.
Somebody told me this week. I mean, I don't know that he's going to. I mean, he may tweet something out or whatever, but I honestly think that you just might learn about his status in the war room where we say, hey, Tom is going to enroll in Tennessee next week and start going to summer school.
Current departures on the roster?
I don't think so. I mean, virtually everybody except for Fulkerson is gone right now. I mean, they left school. They're finishing up virtually. Those guys have not been allowed to go home since, last August. So, I mean, everybody, when they got the chance, they stuck around for a few weeks and did some off-season stuff, and then they hit the road. So everybody went home. They've all had conversations with the head coach. I don't think there's going to be another departure. It wouldn't. You can't never say never, but I think that the roster you see now is what they're going to start with next year. I wouldn't say it's impossible they add somebody else, but as of right now, today, I think the guys that they have are the guys that they're going to start the season with. If somebody else, the portal stays open until July, so it's possible somebody hits it that they get involved with. But as everybody's in the portal right now, I think Tennessee's roster is what it is.
All right, Austin, last question here. We got a couple minutes left. It was mentioned that the previous staff didn't have as good of relationships with high school coaches. Why? That should be every coach's first priority. I don't think it's just the last staff. I think that's been a decade-long issue. I mean, you had Butch Jones's staff didn't recruit West Tennessee. They didn't go out there and deal with Memphis or really anything much west of Jackson. And I think the last staff fell into the trap that a lot of staffs do. They didn't out of the gate believe in players in the state of Tennessee. They felt like the players in the state of Tennessee were over-recruited, overranked, and we're very cautious about moving forward on some guys, particularly when they first got here. That's my take.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. And you're right. This is not a former staff. Like, everybody just wants, like when Jeremy got here, it was always just Butch's problem. It wasn't Butch and Dooley and, even Lane's 1 year. Like, this is not a Pruitt deal. This is a every staff the last 10, 15 years deal. And that's because most of these guys have been outsiders. So when they come in, they don't really understand the state. The state's, you're over here on the far east, and you go all the way to the far west, which is a 6-hour drive, and so on and so forth. The one thing I think that I like they did, and I think it's a little bit overblown, the whole Tennessee takeover thing, and well, they're every coach is in the state. No, they're not. Every coach on this staff was calling high school coaches in the state. That's why it was portrayed the way it was. But realistically, there's like 5 guys in the state. But they're all going to tandem recruit. So like Rodney don't really have a spot in the state, but like, for defensive lineman, he's going to recruit, defensive linemen. So, that's where we go.
Yeah. So we'll see what happens with that. More recruiting to follow moving forward. And we'll talk about it on the General's Quarters. That's going to do it for this edition of the Blue Water Climate Control Volquest.com podcast. For Austin and Rob, I'm Brent Hubbs. Thanks for joining us. Have a great rest of your Thursday, everybody.